Welcome to Series 2 of The X-Files. It's been a long time coming. This is The X-Files, the divorce and separation podcast down under, with me, Alex, and...
Hello, I'm Liza, the co-host of The X-Files.
What we're hoping to do is to give you a little bit of information about the family law space, what happens in there, some hints and tips, and a little bit of resources for you to use if you're going through anything to do with family law.
And we've also changed it up this year. You can see our beautiful faces and interact with us in so many more ways. So stay tuned.
Socials are coming, even for me this time. So that's all happening. We should preface all of these podcasts by the same thing, which is to say, look, this is just me and Liza having a chat. This is just two family lawyers having a conversation with each other. It's not legal advice. It's really important that you get advice tailored to your situation if you're going to go through something like this. But feel free, it's an information source for you. And if you have any questions, please reach out. All of our contact info will be on the podcast links and show notes. We're going to have something of an anthemic approach to our Series 2, which is we're going to sort of go through the life of a family law matter. And it'll jump back and forth a little bit. But we thought we'd start with the what happens as soon as you've separated vibe. So it's you've either done the leaving or you've been left, or you've both reached a conclusion of this relationship's all over and we want to get out of it. So Liza and I thought we'd talk about maybe some practical ideas as to what you can do, which will make your life a lot simpler when it comes to sorting out the legal universe as we go on.
Yeah, because the first 30 days are really important after a separation. There are so many things to be considering, and it often happens at a time when you and your spouse are going through emotional turmoil, a bit of a roller coaster, not sure which way is up. Things that seemed rational are no longer rational. You start to question everything. And so it's really important when you're going through those first 30 days of separation to know that it's not going to all happen in just 1 week. It's not going to be you're done and dusted and move on. It's the start of a process, and it's a process that you need to get advice on pretty early.
But there are still some practical things that you can do, should do. But can I start by, this is more in Liza's forte than mine, but that safety is probably your number one issue that we would say. Firstly, is everybody safe? Is everybody okay? Are you okay? Even is your ex-partner okay? Are the children okay? It's a big challenging time of separation. If it's unexpected, then people can react in all sorts of ways, and it's just human nature to do that. It can be highly emotional, it can be highly stressful. So if there's any hint of any risks of either violence or mental health breakdowns, things like that, the first thing to do with this triage is make sure that people are okay and that they're safe. If anybody's unsafe through threats and violence, then you've got O, or you've got the DV services around the country, like I think it's 1-800-RESPECT that you can call and get some information and guidance as to dealing with those safety issues first. That's my first thing that I would say.
Yes, with the safety aspect, if you're the leaver especially, you might want to have thought about these things. So start getting some of your bits and pieces to your friends and family, things like important documents and some basic essentials, some spare clothes and things that you might have to use in those first few days if you think that there's going to be some kind of blow up. And it doesn't hurt to let someone in on the fact that you are intending on leaving that person. So it's really important that you make sure that you're set up, because if they're not going to take the news very well that, hey, I'm leaving you after all this time, they may react badly. It may not just be in a physically violent way. It may be in other forms of abuse and violence that you need to be concerned about.
But aside from, obviously, we as family lawyers will talk about things like coercive control and domestic violence or family violence. From a practical point of view, there are some things that you can do that Liza was saying there, which is just to say, where can I go and live? Where are the children going to be in this? Am I going to need some help? Do you have a best friend? Do you have your little network, your own personal village? Do you have a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, or somebody that you trust that can give you a hand through this? Some of this is going to be purely logistical. Where will I lay my hat the night that I leave? Or who's going to take care of the dog? There's a lot of those sort of little practical things. They're not really legal considerations at this stage, are they? They're just practical things.
That's right. But People are coming to us because we've seen other people go through it. And it is such a confidential thing. Sometimes people don't feel safe and comfortable telling their friends. I've had plenty of clients in the past who have said to me, look, I haven't told my best friends. They don't know because I'm too ashamed, I'm too embarrassed of being taken for a ride this way. And so people will, in fact, they'll feel a little bit more comfortable confiding in us, funnily enough, probably because we're obliged to keep it all confidential. The T-shirt, we know what people have been through and how to try and protect them when they're going through this period.
That's a good point, actually, that obviously we have a duty of confidentiality to our clients that your friends and your family don't necessarily have to you. And you can say just about anything to us in relation to your relationship issue. And only if you're planning to commit harm or commit a crime must we ever breach that confidentiality. Otherwise,
don't tell your lawyer if you're going to commit some harm. Goodness.
I suppose that's what I've just said, isn't it? But
that's not a good move.
We have to keep your secrets, and your friends and your family don't have that same obligation. And if things change in those relationship dynamics, who knows? Maybe they'll tell your ex about what was going on for however long. So just bear that in mind. You might want to pick up the phone to me or pick up the phone to Liza and say, hey, I need to set up a consult so that I can work through this with you.
So let's just recap. In terms of the very first 24 hours, what we're trying to do is stabilise the situation for your children, for your personal and financial affairs. Okay, we're not trying to win arguments. There's no chest beating competitions at this point in time. We're trying to let the dust settle and we're trying to prioritise safety, and not about winning arguments. It's more about stabilising the situation, stabilising the routine for the kids so that they're none the wiser.
Yeah. And it's really important not to draw the children into any of this. They're going to know of the upheaval, of course, because, one of their parents is going to be moving out, and they may be going with that parent or they may be staying, but they're going to know about it. But what you don't do is to draw them into the conversations that should be had between you and your very freshly ex. That's not going to help them at all. But Liza, you're absolutely right. Keeping things as calm as possible in a really difficult time is the best thing that you can try and aspire to do. And that means a little bit of planning. If you're the person leaving, it means a little bit of planning first. It means making sure that you've got access to money. It means making sure you've got access to your clothes and your toiletries, practical things like that. Ideally, you would have already started to put together in the time leading up to this, your important documents so that you have those, and that there isn't a risk that your ex could just take those, or you might lose those, or you might forget where they are, or they get lost in the melee that's about to ensue. So a little bit of forward planning goes a very long way.
Just on that issue with the kids, I think it's really important. You touched on it before, Alex, when we're talking about not involving them in the conflict. They may not be so appreciative of the issues that are going on, but what's really important at that point is to put on a brave face and not let that shock and that horror of knowing that your relationship's at an end interfere with your job as a parent. And that's to protect your kids from any exposure to any conflict.
Yeah.
So that's the conflict between the two of you.
We see this all the time, don't we? Where the kids have been involved in those conflicts, where they've witnessed these angry fights, these things that have happened as relationships come to its crescendo at its end. And then it continues afterwards with one parent having a go at the other to the children. Ultimately, if you're really unlucky and you end up in the court and you go through proceedings, those are the kinds of behaviours that a judge is going to be very irate to hear about. They do not wish for children to get wrapped up in any of this conflict. There's a lot of the law talks about keeping the kids out of conflict, and how you do that is, as you're saying, to have an age-appropriate conversation with them and don't react to anything adverse about the parent whilst the kids are around. That's what your friend is for, that's what your cup of coffee is for, and with a mate the next day or something. You need to ventilate. I call that
the Friday night shardies.
Maybe it's a Chardonnay, maybe it's a glass of something stronger, maybe you just need to go for a run or something with somebody. You ventilate in other ways that aren't in front of the kids. That's the really important thing, I think, here. So let's think about those first 24 hours. The messages have been delivered. You've either been left or you've left somebody. You've got your bag together and your stuff together if you're the person delivering the "I'm sorry, it's all over" message. If you're the one that's receiving that, you're in a harder place. We've talked on an earlier podcast about the grief cycle, which from memory goes something like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Those are basically the 5 stages of the grief cycle. If you're the person leaving, you may already have transitioned all the way through to acceptance. You've mentally gone through that. It's a shame. I don't want this to happen. Was there something I can do? I feel sad about this, but that's that. Your ex-partner, if you're the one doing the leaving, they are just at that. Wait, what is going on? There may well have been inklings, but sometimes it comes completely out of the blue to somebody. And how do they cope with that? Well, you need to be mindful of that. You need to know who they are, don't you? And make sure that maybe you thought about where they're going to get some support, because ultimately, especially if you've got children, it'll help the kids to know that the other parent is going to be able to cope, because it's very rare that you'll see in a post-separation universe one parent only having the care of the children. So think in terms of, don't create more problems for the person that you're leaving than the events do themselves. It's very young. Who knows the reasons? People break up for all sorts of reasons, and there may be reasons you want to be angry with them and so on. But remember that they would always be the other kid's parent. They would always be the parents to your kids. So give them some kind of respect as well.
That's right.
I've got a little note here that I scribbled down about some of the financial and money records that you might want to grab hold of, either as you're running out of the door or in the days when you're bringing yourself up to the moment of saying, this is what's going to happen next. So what kinds of things would you suggest somebody takes with them, or puts aside, or makes copies of?
Email accounts and passwords and things like that. Everyone is on their phones these days. Everything's through an email. You've got Apple IDs, and you've got a list of all your passwords. Make sure you have control of that list and that you know where it is. And if your spouse has had access to it at any point in time, you need to quickly go through and change all those passwords, because the very first thing that someone does usually when they're going through this situation is they'll start logging into your accounts and say, well, where does all this come from? I don't see what's happened. And is she seeing someone else? Is he seeing someone else? I'm going to log into his email. I'm going to see what there is. I'm going to track him on his phone. I'm going to use the Find My Phone, all that sort of stuff. So the very first thing and the most important thing, I think, is to make sure that all your data is secure, where that means through your bank accounts and setting yourself up financially. Sometimes I will tell people, just transfer a little bit of money first and put it aside in a separate account. It may be that you've never really had access to anything. You don't have your own separate bank account. Plenty of people don't. Plenty of people have just joint accounts. And if you're wanting to leave, you're going to need to have some money. So you want to do a couple of things. One is apply for that credit card before you leave, so that you get that credit card and he can't touch or she can't touch that. And secondly, get a little bit of money for yourself. Put it aside. Go to the bank, get some cash out, put it under the mattress, whatever you need to do. You need to think, how are you going to survive in those next few weeks or months, particularly if you've got very intermingled financials between the two of you?
Yeah, and that's not to say that you have to block absolutely everything. But if you've got a lot of money or some savings or something like that, where there's an appreciable amount, you might, as you're saying, think it's a good idea to either transfer, it could be half of what's in there into a separate private account. Or it could be that you contact the bank and say, look, I need this to be only released above a certain amount of money, maybe $1,000, only if we both agree. And that very much depends upon what your own situation is. If you've got billions in the bank, then you probably won't need to worry too much about that. Most of us
I think I'd probably worry a bit more if I had billions in the bank. I'd be like, oh, God, you've got more to lose then, don't you?
Doesn't Elon? I don't think Elon and the like have anything in cash, do they? It's all in sort of shares and borrowings. Isn't that how you live? Live life without paying taxes is to live off borrowed money against your vast assets. But we won't need to worry about that too much, I don't expect. So it's making sure you've got a little bit of a financial lifeline before you jump the jump, or if it happens to you, then go, quick, I need to just make sure that I can ring fence a bit of money, a bit of resources for me so that I can cope over the next few weeks. If you're the person who's maybe been at home a lot, as you're saying, then you might not have had so much control over the finances. Or, conversely, you might have been. The other person might just go to work and come home and just flump on the sofa, and you do all of the household admin, in which case they're going to be in a bit of a difficulty. Okay, this isn't okay. You'll at some point need to think about if you're receiving any child benefits from Centrelink or something like that. You might need to contact Services Australia, so Centrelink, and say my relationship status has changed, and just let them know. That can be quite helpful for us as lawyers sometimes because it puts a line in the sand. It's a real.
Data
I've told
separation.
the government, yeah, you notify Centrelink saying, hey, look, I've separated from my partner on X date. It's then a date you can come back to in the future if you need to establish that was the date of separation, if there's ever any doubt about it. And sometimes there is. Sometimes the date of separation is quite important.
Well, it's actually really important. It's actually a nice segue into our next segment, which is talking about the legal side of this initial stage of separation. So we often will get a phone call saying, oh, I'm separated from my partner, I want to get a divorce. And what people are often doing is that they are not actually understanding what a divorce is as opposed to a property settlement, as opposed to parenting arrangements. So most people would generally call it a divorce. Us lawyers, we get what you're getting at, but we do have to be specific about that. And there are timeframes that you have to abide by before you can, in fact, get divorced. So when you're saying, oh, we separated 3 weeks ago, I want to get a divorce, that's not happening anytime soon.
12 months. You have to wait 12 months from the date of separation is the legal test, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's one of the reasons why notifying Centrelink, for example, of the date of separation, that does draw a line in the sand so that you're reducing issues between you. When did you actually separate? I've had matters where parties have said, oh, well, we actually separated 7 years ago. And then one person says, oh, no. See, we went on holidays together. So it becomes very, very muddy.
A bedroom and all of these things, and it's complicated.
Separated under one roof with benefits,
or without.
Sometimes with benefits, not so much with benefits.
Yeah,
that's just marriage.
Actually, you've mentioned separated under one roof. I mean, it's a bit tangential to what we sort of came on to talk about, but you can do that, can't you? You can say, look, if you are civil to each other, you don't want to be in the relationship anymore, but you're still cordial with each other. You can separate under the same roof if you've got an extra bedroom, for example, and you can do that. All that you then have to do in a year's time when you apply for a divorce is to put some evidence on, and it's usually just an affidavit from you, maybe with a couple of friends too, that say, oh yeah, they were living different lives. It was just finances that meant that they had to stay under the same roof because they couldn't afford to buy or rent 2 places at the same time. That's possible. So it could be, and this very much is a dynamic that works within everybody's unique relationships. It could be that when you separate, you say, hey, look, I'm going to move into the spare room, or I think I'm going to live in my shed for 6 months. But whatever it might be, you could do that within the home. The other thing that I'm encountering a little bit more, I suppose, in these days of financial pressure at home is the nesting situation, where the children will stay living in the house all the time in the former home, and the parents
all the time. Yeah, I like the tone of that, Alex.
Oh, I know. It's like, God, are they never leaving? No, I don't. If the boys watching, of course, you stay forever. Sometimes the case, it's easier for younger children to stay in the family home for at least a period of time, whilst the parents, it's mum's week this week and it's dad's week that week, or whatever that might be. And those parents effectively couch surf with friends and family in the off week for a little while, whilst you try and work things out. That can work sometimes. It's not advisable, I don't think, to do it for many years.
It's short term.
It's a short term thing. But if you,
I would get really cranky about it because I just, you've got your stuff there. You're like, who else are you bringing here? Going through all my bits and bobs. No, I wouldn't like it. It works for some. It works for plenty. So
it does work for some, but it doesn't work for some for very long. It's a matter of months probably. I don't plan that sort of arrangement for years. I mean, great if it works. I mean, very 70s of you, but there it is. You mentioned the time limits. And so you've got from the time that you separate, if you're married, you never actually have to divorce. There's no compunction upon you to divorce. You can stay married legally for the rest of your lives. Some people choose to do that. Some people, well, you had a matter a little while back, didn't you, where they had been separated for like 25 plus years and had never done a divorce. And then it was the process of applying for divorce that caused the other person to go, oh, I wonder if they've got money these days.
I can get some money here. I'm going to tap into that. Yeah, didn't work out too well for her, but
I
anyway.
usually advise people if you're genuinely separated, you don't have some kind of religious or cultural reason to stay married, then do the divorce. It will be easier legally and cleaner
Mm.
legally, and you won't have these problems 25 years into the future. You barely remember what your ex looked like by then. Yeah. So the other limitations that we've got, when we will talk about these things in other episodes about property settlement limitations, but
Yeah.
you've got a fair bit of time. So in the immediate aftermath of the relationship breakdown, you've got a fair bit of time. You've got at least a couple of years in which to file proceedings if you're going to. And I'm not suggesting that you wait that long before you're doing anything about it, far from it. But I'm saying you don't need to think, oh my goodness me, will I lose legal rights right away now, do you? It's just, you've got a bit of time to do that. And the best way to go at this point, which I'm bound to say, I suppose, as a family lawyer, is go and see a family lawyer. Go and sit down with somebody like Liza or me who does this. We do this all the time, giving people advice as to what to do next, what happens next, what to expect. What's your recent experiences been? When are people coming to see you? Is it straight away or are they waiting a bit?
Well, I've had most recently either people just before they separate because they want a bit of advice. I think mainly because a lot of my approach is preparation, preparation, preparation. If you're going to do it, most people don't just wake up one day and go, ah, we're over, done.
Mm,
Most people have thought it through. So when you're thinking it through, you should probably go and get some preliminary advice at that point.
yeah,
When you have made that decision, a lot of people do come to me in those first few weeks, but the vast majority of people don't usually come to me for fulsome advice until they've been separated for about 3 or 4 months.
yeah.
So it's usually been a few months, let the dust settle, see how it's all going. Do I, in fact, need a lawyer? Like there are plenty of people who don't actually need a formal settlement and they don't realize that they don't need one.
Mm. If if you're young and there's not much in the way of assets and things like that at the time that you break up, and you haven't been together very long, then you probably don't need to overthink this. It's a good idea to talk to, say, somebody like you or me,
Mm.
just to get a clear understanding of your own situation. But sometimes there won't have been any accrual of any kind of property between you, and you can just walk away from one another without an agreement. I mean, as a lawyer, I'm never going to really like that as a lawyer because it just feels a little bit untidy, but it's perfectly feasible.
Mm.
Um, Nobody thinks that going into the land of the law is a particularly cheap option at the time that you do it, but it can be some of the best dollars you'll ever spend to stop problems occurring into the future. But
Mm.
probably a consultation is a really good idea in those days afterwards or in those days leading up to. It is quite rare actually that you encounter a couple that have separated spontaneously. It's usually something that both of both of the people know is on the cards. Relationships don't tend to sort of go sour overnight. Certainly not ones that
Mm.
are of a long term, where you build property up together or you've had kids together. You know when things aren't quite right. And it's a good idea, isn't it, just to go and have a chat with somebody beforehand. What should I do? Uh, so legal advice is always a good idea, but then I'm bound to say that.
The other reason that legal advice actually helps is that if you're in a situation where there's a power imbalance between you, and this is not gender specific, this can be in any relationship, one party is often the dominant party. And if you don't feel that you're able to communicate very well or negotiate your position or even appreciate what your rights are, you've got your lawyer in your back pocket. You've got that little bit of advice. You've got that little bit of reassurance. So we're talking about reassurance to the children right at the start of this episode. We also need to make sure that your cup is filled, that you have the necessary reassurance that what you're doing is the right thing and you're doing it the right way. And you might be a bit uncertain. Should I message him about this? Should I offer overnight time? Should I?
Mm,
That's where you go and see a lawyer.
yeah, I know. I know that you can probably put somebody's mind at rest very quickly about something that they may be worried about. And I get those calls too. And to us, it seems, oh, this is a very simple and straightforward answer, but it can be
Mm-hmm.
something that really causes, a person a great deal of worry because we live in this space all the time. So this is what we understand. And we see people going through all sorts of situations that they probably don't need to. They don't need to worry about a lot of things that they do.
Alex, I wanted to ask What has been your experience in terms of what would you recommend for someone who is in that situation where they're experiencing a bit of family violence and they're a bit scared?
If somebody had spoken to me before they were going to deliver the news, I would probably suggest that they have somebody already on hand very nearby in case things escalate. So that they've got some safety net there of another person. It might be a friend, it might be a sibling or something like that. Someone really close. If things descend into violence, you must involve the police. You've got to give the police a call because that's never okay. And you certainly don't want anything going off in front of the children because it could traumatise them for many years to come. So if things are going to become unpleasant and there's the controlling rather than violence, outward violence, you need to think about, should you stay in that home? And if you're the one that doesn't have control of things, it might be better for you to stay in that home. I know that sounds a bit more difficult, but the person who is able to control finances, is able to control things or has been controlling, they should be capable of finding themselves somewhere else to live. If they don't wish to, you do have options around. If you can establish that there's any actual domestic violence, you could ask the court to make what's called an ouster order so that they are made to leave the home. The difficulty that you sometimes have is things haven't reached quite that level of hostility. How do you persuade that person to go? Well, it's extremely difficult. If they don't want to go, you really can't force them. And if you don't want to stay in that environment, you will have to pack your bag. You will have to leave. Otherwise, you're going to be confronted by that person every morning over the breakfast table, and that's not going to be very nice or very good for you mentally. Ideally, you have a sensible conversation with them and potentially with a third party saying, hey, I'm sorry, but, Jill, Ben, Bob or Dave, that, you've got to go because it's not fair on the other person. I'm not a great advocate for using family members as mediators in this sense. I think it just draws other people into a dispute, but I've seen that work sometimes. I have also done, as I'm sure you have done many times too, that letter, that dreaded letter that is left on the kitchen table whilst you go out, knowing that they're coming home at some point, and there's a letter in an envelope, and it'll be from a lawyer like me that says, dear so and so, I'm afraid the relationship's over.
One.
Yeah, and I'm not a lover of writing those letters, but sometimes it's a good way to formalize something which everybody's known about. The elephant in the room is that this relationship's over. We just haven't said it out loud. But they come home, there's a letter saying, wow. And it's very confronting, and it might take a couple of days before you can go back in. But in those letters, I've written things like, look, please don't stuff up the cards around. Please, could you get yourself out of the house within 2 days because she or he's going to come back and move into the place. We know that you've got the resources to do that. They don't. And it sets them up, it sets your client up quite well for them to be able to step away for a few days and then come back in. And I always invite the other person, if I'm on acting for somebody, always inviting the other person, please go and get a lawyer. Because whilst, the ex-partners, the ex-husband, the ex-wives, they maybe can't talk to each other. It's too raw, it's too emotional. For example, if we're on the other side of each other, then we can just pick up the phone and say, hey, we've got this matter. What should we do about it? And we can have those conversations. So engaging with a family lawyer right at the outset is so much better for parties where there's going to be conflict. Our role under the court rules is to try and help people out of these situations without it becoming overly litigious, without it becoming overly expensive. That's our primary role in this.
Well, I've got a list of what not to do because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, as I said. So here's some tips that I think are going to be pretty important. We don't want to try and solve the whole settlement in that first month. It's not going to settle. It's unlikely to settle because what's going to happen, as we said at the start, you're at different places of the separation process in most cases. So that's not going to work. So don't.
I have to put my menace from Mars hat on so that I understand it's not my job to try and fix everything immediately because it just can't be done, can it?
Well, I think you're putting yourself under unnecessary pressure thinking it has to be all resolved. It doesn't have to be resolved that quickly. The other thing is, when we mentioned about the financial stuff, don't take all the money out of the accounts, okay? Just take half. If you're going to take it, take half or take what you need. Don't take the lot, okay? It's not yours to take. It's stuff that you've got to work through in due course, but not just yet. And I think my other tip is not to sign anything in those first 30 days. Don't agree to redraws. Don't agree to getting off titles. Don't agree to signing mortgage papers that you don't know what you're signing. Just don't sign anything is the trick. In those first 30 days, until you've seen a lawyer, don't sign anything because you just don't know what it is or why they're doing it, particularly if you're the leavee and you're stuck at home and you've just been hit with, oh, I'm leaving you. By the way, can you just sign these things? They've obviously planned this a lot longer. So you need to make sure that this is all legit, at what they're doing, okay? And it's all in your interest. So they're the 3 main tips that I have of what not to do. But if you want to know more, book a consult and we can talk about things if you want to know specifically about what you should and shouldn't do.
And look, I think you touched on one of the shouldn't do's as well, which is don't assume that even if you're being super friendly and you're going, yeah, you're being grown up, you're being adult, don't think that you don't need legal advice. Now, I know that sounds a little bit self-serving for us as lawyers to say that, but people are great at wearing masks at these times. And friendliness can be a way of deflecting attention from what I'm really doing in the background. And then suddenly you're going to get hit up with a whole tranche of sort of legal problems. So smile, say, yeah, that's great. Let's both go and get our own advice and get this sorted out properly and professionally. Well, that's quite a lot of information to sort of take in for what to do in the immediate aftermath. I mean, we can create some checklists and things like that and make those things downloadable, I guess, for people, if that would be of any interest. And it's really, if you're the one doing the leaving, you have an opportunity to, this sounds brutal, but to plan things a little bit and to make sure that you can think about what's day 2 going to look like and what's month 2 going to look like, or even in a year from now, where do I want to be? And so you can put those financial records together. You can think about where the living arrangements, how they might look like. If you're the one is the leavee, this is a new expression, but it's great. Maybe.
I make expressions up every day.
You get on the telephone to Liza, you get on the telephone to me and you say, hey, what should I do? This is my situation, because no 2 situations are ever the same, are they?
No, they're not. And especially as the leavee, you do have some control over it because it's the way that you react to it that will set the case up. So if you blow everything up, then you can understand what's going to happen with your case. But if you react a bit differently, if you've got some measured advice from a solicitor, then you should be in a good space to be able to respond appropriately and protect your interests, even though they may be a few steps ahead.
Yeah. And that being behind is not for very long. If you go and see a decent family lawyer, they'll get you in a good place legally. You'll get your emotional support from your friends and your family and any therapist that you need. But legally, going to see somebody sooner rather than later means that you will be on an even keel fairly soon in terms of the information and where you go with the processes. So don't panic about that. Maybe that's the big message, which is don't panic. It's horrible, but it's soluble.
Okay, so that brings this episode to a close.
It does.
Thank you for joining us today. Next week, we will be talking about property settlements. You may have, in fact, heard previous episodes with us talking about property settlements, but there have, in fact, been some developments in the law, which is why we have to go through that in a bit more detail again, particularly in light of the changes. So please send us a note or a DM on your socials with any questions or anything that you want specifically addressed in any of our episodes.
Yeah.
And make sure you share it with your friends and family.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we love any feedback that you've got. Thanks, Liza.
Thank you.